Can everybody hear me? Of course. Exactly. Can y'all hear me? Yeah, this new system is bugged out. Or did you hear everything from the beginning? Because if so, I gotta put in a marker. See, I knew it. These dudes be bugging with me. It's all good. Just give me 1 second. I gotta do it now because now people be like, yo, just doing it. Which is crazy, but you know.
What did I teach you? You are Duke of New York. You're a number one. I can't hear you. You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
Okay. Everybody heard that, right? Awesome. I hate being redundant. Hope everybody's well. Hope everybody's been dealing with the different changes. The volume is low. Let me see. How about now? Better? Okay. Excellent. Yeah, everybody just also please make sure you're muted so that way there's nobody talking over everything. I have you muted, but sometimes things happen. Hope everybody's well. Anybody have any questions about anything before you get into it? I hope everybody's dealing with the transition well, seeing all of the collapse of the bureaucratic system that everybody just thinks that this dude is just arbitrarily just, getting rid of stuff, you know. And it's warranted to a degree because a lot of people have come to think that the present system way that it looks presently is the epitome of how a democracy is supposed to function. And that's not really the case when you're dealing with the United States because the United States didn't start out as a democracy. You know what I'm saying? Um, by the time we got to the point that it's called the United States, the world itself has gone through maybe however many different upheavals, you know what I mean, globally, which led to the dispersion of peoples throughout the known world who had various cultures and were not necessarily down or parties to these so-called ancient covenants that these people today are holding on to that allows them to claim huge tracts of land and stuff like that, due to their being the possessors of it today. Okay. Vonnie asks, what do you know about the Paleo Indians? Online research say they are the first people to record their history. That's you. That's basically you. You know what I mean? Or those of us that were born to the Americas, um, ancestrally. You know what I'm saying? Even if there was a break, like we are the descendants of those who were left after everything had been rendered asunder from the different cataclysms, right? As well as universal conflicts that had struck the world universally up until that point. You understand what I'm saying? So we are living in an era that is, in a sense, some people would say is the culmination of, okay, remember, let me bring it back to a movie. Okay, anybody seen Deadpool and Wolverine, right? Remember when they went to the void? Remember they was in the void, and the void was filled up with all the history or historical stuff from different time periods, all like thrust together, and it was like a wasteland, and you had people that had a pseudo government that was basically living inside of a dome, right? It's cool. Had a dome on it and couldn't really get out, and they was savage, right? And they were all under the jurisdiction of a big head scientist. You understand what I'm saying? It's always the same story because these people are always playing out the same ritual because time, in terms of their understanding of it, had already ended. So, like I said, we're in the, let's say, post-apocalyptic branch of a line that essentially has died out. That's why the breakthroughs that they're giving you in science always seem to, one, be hidden, but they always seem to be somewhat geared to a certain area or to a certain um what's the word, certain discipline. You know what I mean? Like the last things that happened technologically that advanced the global society as we know it, right, was really like the phone. You know what I mean? Like the cell phone. Like think about that. Like that's where all the technological advances come from. And they're not even to your benefit. They're coming from the perspective of your, it's a compel benefit. It benefits them to put all of that tech in the phone more than it benefits you. You know what I'm saying? Because ultimately, all of these people, for good or for bad, are aware of the present system and its inevitable implosion. But it's not an ending. You know what I'm saying? Because we've been bred in a Judeo Christian, Islamic, uh, ancestral, Gnostic, atheist, you know what I'm saying? Gumbo of United States media culture. We have created the delineations between God, or the perception of God, based upon the type of religion that the person that we're discussing God, or the person who is displaying what they believe God is. You understand what I'm saying? So we Moors, before I finish that, Timothy said, I was looking at the map of the United States with the inclusion of Canada and Greenland. It could not help but think that Trump claiming more of the land just to turn back into the Moors' hands when they fall. Do you think that this time? Yes, we're going to get into that. Yes, the stage is being set for a lot of that to happen. However, that will never happen until the Moors themselves understand what their position is in it. And the Moors themselves, as the prophet said, learn to love instead of hate. Like, I don't hate anybody that's not Moorish. I don't hate anybody that may hate people who are Moors, or who um, don't see themselves as Moorish, right? Because most of those people who do that, most likely, ancestrally, historically, the empire probably did something to them that was really screwed up towards the end. You know what I mean? But we are the remnants of those that were there towards the end. You know what I'm saying? That's why we were able to be here at the beginning. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the Granadan epoch, right? You get this period now where you have a whole generation of people who are somewhat, who have just Some of them have just given up on society altogether. These niggas just went into the jungles. They was like, you know what? Forget all of this. Forget these cities. Forget this, whatever, we out. And they bounced and they went into the jungle, became animists, lived off the land, kept the ancient secrets and stuff, and created a circumstance for them to always be able to retap into it, retap into it if they needed to, if they decided to go back to the world. You know what I'm saying? That's how that's how a lot of these people wound up in these primitive, so-called primitive cultures. But if you go and you speak to those people who live in those primitive cultures, who live in those jungles and all of that, they got the entire science on how the whole jungle work. They know where the demons is at, they know where the fairies is at, they know where the boas is at, the anacondas, all types of shit. Like, it's so thick in there that they don't even, people, you can't even go in there, and they've lived in there for hundreds of years. You had the so-called slaves that Cortez had imported from Siberia after the great fall of Teotihuacan, and then a lot of them broke rank and then just ran up into the jungle, and they ancestors have been in there ever since. Meaning that the people who we was shepherding fell under the jurisdiction of these other people, turned against us, and then at the collapse and fall, all of that, all of them was like, to hell with all everybody, and then just went away. That's why I said, well, where did these cities just go? The people just abandoned. A lot of them were killed. A lot of them were, you know what I mean, disrupted. Some of them actually walked into the other alternate realities. Some of them went beyond what you'll call the ice walls or whatever. But those of us that was left, we are the ones with the ancestral memories of all of that, because that is handed down to us genetically in what is called an epigenetic, what is it called? Epigenetic uh, transition or transition of history, meaning that it's literally in our bones. You know what I mean? And that explains why we're always the ones that's the most dejected. But we're the last people on earth to create a whole nother culture that the entire earth now has bore witness to as that. We just saw that at the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Regardless to whether it was invented by CIA, regardless to whether or not it destroyed more people than it helped, right? It still created the circumstance that took thousands, if not millions, of so-called melanated people out of poverty. Not just in terms of hip hop, but all the adjacent stuff that comes with that. Thank you, Heru. It's an epigenetic generational trust. Yes, that's exactly what it is, and it is centered inside your actual DNA itself. That's why when we talk about certain historical cultures, you might have flashbacks, or you might start having memories, or you might see elements of all of that now that you've discussed it. You know what I'm saying? And so, like on your screen, when you see this destruction, right? This was based. This might as well be Tulsa, Oklahoma. This might as well be, you know what I'm saying? The Sauk Empire's kingdom that they bombed and destroyed. You know what I mean? Black Hawk was one of the last kings to fight against them. But if I show you a picture of Black Hawk, he look exactly like Elijah Muhammad. I'll do that towards the end of the thing, because they're the same people. That's why they named the team after him or whatever. Because after they conquer you, then they turn you into a god, into their pantheon, because that's how they work. And then once you're formally canonized within them as a saint or martyr to their victory or their defeat, they then enter you into as one of their people. So you get other people to start worshiping you, and now you can become a deity that can feed off of people when you go. One of the things that people again don't understand about things like Freemasonry in the modern incantation of it is that it's actually an ancient priesthood of eternal resetters. Okay, people who are inducted, as Drake said, inducted and instructed to bang on people that they don't f with. You know what I'm saying? Because they are a part of the pre-antediluvian, pre-flood, pre whatever you want to call it, cultures that existed prior to the rising of the so-called Adamic family. Okay, Time never was when man was not, according to the Circle 7 Quran, right? It says that the never was, if time ever was a time, the time began, and surely would be a time the time would end. But they're constantly telling us that time don't exist. Yet at the same time, they're still making watches. I mean, they're telling us the time is running out, but they still making watches. Niggas are still buying Richard Millie's. Niggas are still telling time by the, you know what I'm saying? It's not like niggas just gave up on time. So okay, we just gonna tell time by the sun again. We're gonna start using sundials instead of these, you know, APs and all of that. No, niggas is buying watches. Same way they say, oh, climate change is destruction. All of the coastlines and these places in these pristine and beautiful areas is gonna be washed away and destroyed because of the climate change, right? Then how come that's the case? Then how come Oprah and all of these niggas is constantly buying waterfront property? How does that work? How does it that Zuckerberg and all of these rich people got all of this lakefront, shorefront, beachfront, oceanfront, right? Shorefront, riverfront, right? Whatever the front property with water, these niggas got it, but then they constantly telling us ain't enough water. We shouldn't buy land on the water, buy close to the water because the floods is gonna come and knock everybody out. But yeah, still, right? Did any of the rich people that got their houses burnt up, have they moved out? Have they gone anywhere? No, no, because they're going to rebuild there because the purpose of that burning was a purge. We got to get rid of all of the records, get rid of all of the DNA, everything that was there. So when the hammer come down, it's all burnt out. All the real evidence gone. We done closed off all the tunnels. It's giving us time to close up the tunnels and all of that because all of them houses are connected. And it's been that way for thousands of years. From when Queen Khalifa lived in the hills. You know what I'm saying? When she was up in there with the Griffins and all of that. The so-called Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz. So you see what I'm saying? So it's all a scam. They all a scam. But these Freemasons, they're trained, right? Or the real ones, the ones worth they salt, they trained from the old system to, let's say, all of the Masons, everything civilization was to die and all of that. They are trained. The real ones is trained to be able to restart civilizations, to restart priesthoods, institutions, and all of that, and keep the same bullshit going, just under this name now. So, okay, it was Apollo in the last era. So now it's this one. It was Kronos in the last era. And now in this one is Saturn. See what I'm saying? And then the next era is going to be Wotan. And then after Wotan, it's going to be Odan. And then after Odan, it's going to be Jupiter. You see what I'm saying? It's the same energy entity displaying itself, creating covenants, right, with people, or people inventing covenants with it. And through their spiritual power and through their God essence, they actually give consciousness to this thing. And now this thing believes that it's real. And now it is their God. It is alive and is jealous and tells them that it's going to kill them and who they need to sacrifice and all of that. Because why? Because its operating system, the initial program was that first piece of wood that this nigga whittled out and then set up on this table. And then eventually the table went from wood to, stone, and then from stone to marble, and then from marble to gold. And if you see what I'm saying? And then the idol get bigger and better, and then they got to put more on it because more people paying attention to it, and it's bringing money. Right? It's bringing money. So we gotta ride this thing out. We gotta see how far this thing could go. So if we gotta make people believe that it is what it is, and guess what? After a generation or two of the original priest dying, they done already created the order to preserve the real secret of what it really is. So by the time they go, they can only pass that on to one of the two that then came up with them that's entrusted with the story to then keep the story going on, right? So then by the time there's another so-called reset or reestablishment or renaissance or reconquista or revolution, or see what I'm saying? Reversion or whatever it is, there's somebody there to be able to keep the old bullshit here instead of starting something totally new. We don't have control over that. Because all of the, like on your screen, you're seeing at the top of Trump Tower, he got Saturn. He's everybody's pops. They call this nigga Uncle Trump. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like that. And again, you're talking. I'm speaking from the perspective of an observer. I never voted for him. I never, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I grew up with him. Like everybody in New York at that time. I don't know how it was outside of New York in his persona or whatever, but regardless, they was already setting him up to be certain things. But one thing was, he all up until the jogger thing, he was always about black people. It was always black people up around him, rich black folk, because that's really the only type of black folk that they get in contact with, other than the people that work for them. But one thing about him, like I said, was that he brought money to the city, and he was associated with money. Period. And that money was associated with success. So call him bankrupt, call him all that type of, you can say whatever you want. They done convicted the nigga 34 times and he still came out. What does that tell you? And again, this is either the greatest chance victory, right? Or Biden was the alley-oop to make him even look even better. That's the other play, right? But either way, meaning that people was hating on him. Okay, we're gonna put Pedo Joe in there so it looked like, so we can make things real bad. So then when this dude come in, it's boom. It's game time, and now we can really get what we want to get done, which is the dismantling of the government. Because people understand all of this is coming from a court case that the DNC, everybody trying to make everybody forget. I was one of the only people to talk about it. It was called the Chevron deference. When they lost the ability to call in the Chevron deference, that was the article or statute that allowed non-government agencies to act on behalf of legitimate government agencies, create their own bureaucracies and their own codes for law enforcement of those pseudo bureaucracies. Okay? Once they lost the power to do that, that means anything that is not legitimately a part of the United States Republican form of government under the Article 3 Constitution, under the Article 4 United States flag, the original joint, under the proper so-called syntax, the way the white boy Windmiller or whatever was talking about it, right? That then put them in a quandary because now they were operating under international fraud openly. They could not longer use those agencies to create legislation and policy throughout the world because the funding for those agencies came from a slush fund called the USA that was initially established by JFK to pay for all of the murder and killing that the CIA had been doing up until the point that he was in. Because he, before he died, was going to shut it all down. He was doing the same shit this nigga doing. Right? But the problem is he's down with it. You can't be down with these niggas and then flip later. You understand what I'm saying? So that became the problem, and he had to get up out of here. But that Nasara Jasara bill that essentially came out of that, the original purpose of the U.S. aid structure was there. It just became co-opted under Johnson, who handed it over to Dulles and them, who was running CIA, the twins, right? The clone twins that was running CIA at the time. And then that's when it all went tits up, right? And then they started using that to basically turn everybody gay. All of the funding to turn everybody in the world gay come from these think tanks paid for by the Tides Foundation under the purview of a dude named Jennifer Pritzker. So, dude, I got on the app. I got the whole breakdown of all of that, of who's paying for all of this stuff. It's all coming from the Tides Foundation, the Gates Foundation, right? Because it's all about government destabilization by creating a Saturnian, a cubed system that everybody functions under as a means of expression. that black cube, that Saturnian energy, right, can people see as bad, to the point that Saturn and Satan sometimes are used simultaneously, right, or interchangeably. But Saturn is not Satan. There's a book you can get called Saturn: An Old Look at a new look at an old devil. It's a good, really good book. One of the best books I've ever read on Saturn as a concept, a place, entity, right? Whatever. So you're dealing with a bunch of Saturnian pagans, Gnostics, right? Who are all devotees to different entities, right? Religion is the expression of these entities and how they interrelate each other to keep each other relevant on the physical plane. The more devotees the so-called religion has, the so-called entity has, because the collective mind of the people engaged the other dimensional energy that coalesces itself into a form, and that form becomes the so-called God that you have essentially initiated, because you are the piece of the source material that we call God, that is experiencing creation in a lesser form. You're experiencing the entirety of creation in the imperfect form, in this place that is actually the void. Doesn't Earth exist in a void? Even people who believe in the solar model, the Helios model, okay, you're a ball and you're spinning through space at hyper velocity, and then you have other smaller objects, bigger objects floating around you at the same time, and then you're floating around a sun that is also then moving. Okay, let's say that's what you believe, right? Because that's where we were taught. Who taught us this? Who taught us this? The educational system. Okay, who owned the educational system? Right? Okay. First, it was earned by Warburg and them at the first part of the reset. Let's say from 1812 to about 1865. Then from about 1900 on, then it became owned. Then Rockefeller owned it. Right? Once Rockefeller owned it, then they started doing what? They started changing the educational system. Right? It became again more Saturnian based, because this is the god that these people, these resetters, are the ones who are that they're serving. Because remember, they said that Yeshua came, right? Lived, was murdered, right? Third day rose. Then maybe a year. Then people seen him, mad close people. They knew this. We're going by the story now. We're not getting into whether it's true or not, whether you're a Christian or not, whether I'm a Muslim or not. We just talking about the story in a looking at it from a analytical, historical context, right? Detective context. So he see the people, they see him, they like, oh, this nigga's back. This is crazy. That means the kingdom is at hand. That means if he came back and it's really him, then that means that everything else he said is going to happen. So that means the kingdom of heaven and all of that is going to manifest, and we are the stewards, the shepherds of that. So we got to go to all of the different churches throughout the land to preach this, right? So where was these churches at? These churches was in Europe, right? No, no, they weren't. According to them, they was in the Middle East, right? No, they wasn't. They was in Asia. Asia, I thought that he was preaching to the Egyptians and the black Israelites and these people. How come after he dying, the people who received the message that Paul and these niggas is under, or Peter, whoever is under, and they receiving these messages, the seven main churches that became the chief churches to all of the other branches, right? That accepted this new thing. How come they was all in Asia? The Romans wasn't Asian. Well, technically they was West Asian, but today we're seeing them as Europeans. but technically they wasn't. So okay, so he writes all of these churches, all of these. So what that tells us is there was man Christian churches in Asia. So he gets up out of here by let's say 68, 69 AD. The temple falls in 70 AD, right? And then that's when Josephus and these other people start writing all of these stories about um what they saw happening in the coming of this new kingdom, right? Uh Before I get into that, I'll finish with this on your screen. So on your left hand side, they're saying that at the very north pole of Saturn, this is what you see, right? This is the storm, and this is the shape that the storm takes at the forefront of Saturn, at the northern pole. That's why I'm showing this, and I'm also showing you the color, right? The stone or the Kaaba, right, is not mentioned really in the Quran like that. So that should give you something. Also, they saying that it was built by Ishmael and all of that. Could be. What I do know is that inside is hollow, and there's a little altar, and one guy goes in there and he cleans it out every other day or whatever. It's got kind of like a vaulted ceiling, you know. Other than that, that's really it. You know what I mean? The real charm in it is the sanguia side, which is the little vagina shaped opening on the side that all of the dudes try to put their face in, right? But then these same crazy people say that they don't believe in cunnilingus and stuff. See what I'm saying? Like it's very weird. It's very weird because when you're dealing with the Saturnian energy trying to be the father, right? But then like you're overly doing it. Like when you become overly masculine, what happens? You become overly feminine, right? Right? Like it imagine a dude who is just so ultra, like when you think in your mind, like this dude, like you've seen dudes like this that are just so ultra mega that it's like you're compensating for something because nobody who's secure themselves want that much attention. You know what I'm saying? For being secure in themselves. So it's the same thing with this stuff. Okay. So at the close of the reign, let's say of the Moors, right? Because we're Moorish people, so we're gonna speak on like how that looked, right? After, okay, here we go. They want us to believe that our world, that the world itself is ending when that can't be. When they talk to you about Christianity, for instance, they are talking to you from the perspective that the timing is at hand, meaning that there's going to be a second coming. There's going to really like a third coming now, in which now this person comes and then with him now everything gets reorganized and reset again, right? The problem with that is when you read the actual stuff, it seems to say that that the people that he talking to was the people that was there. The current nation state of Israel, established in 1948, is not of God because the land promises made to Abraham. I found this on the internet. Uh, Abraham and the fathers were fulfilled long ago. This is recorded of the Old Testament, right? Deuteronomy, Joshua, Jeremiah, Nehemiah. King David and Solomon were in possession of the whole land up into the river Euphrates, right? Promised to Abraham and whatever. Israel's continued occupation of the land depended on what? Remember, I always say that they're the ones that violated the covenant with the God that they made or created. And that God, right? Because remember, these dudes were Egyptians initially. Whether they were native born so called Egyptians or they were from other nations around Kemet or whatever, they were not of a specific bloodline of people at this point when they first left, according to their story. They were a mixed multitude. They didn't have no direction, no leader. They all was practicing different versions of paganism. You understand? Then a pagan god, they decide is going to be this new god is going to be now their main god. And because this they were convinced by Musa that this the one that delivered them. So they deserve all of the thing with him. And if they keep the covenant with him, that would allow them to maintain and eventually set up a kingdom for themselves. But to set up that kingdom for themselves, they got to go and kill everybody that's already have kingdoms and lands and families and children and all of that that's already in these lands that we'll call the lands of Canaan. That their God, they say, promised to them. So when they broke these covenants with this God, they broke the chances for them to maintain what it is they had, according to their story, right? And it was because of their national sins. See, their national sins, right? So that means the sins against their own nation, their own people, their own flag. See, because they said they was going to be like this, and they wasn't going to do this, and they wasn't going to do that. They murdered, raped, killed, burned, maimed, guillotined, everything that you see, the horrors that we experienced after the fall and the coming of the law of Burgos. When that happened, all of that made that was it. This was the punishment that they got themselves into. And anybody that was rocking with them caught the strays. See what I'm saying? But not everybody that was a part of that broke that covenant. And those were the ones that were able to maintain their nations outside of so-called the kingdom of Israel. That's why it didn't last so long. Right? By the time they really got it popping, what happened? They sinned against their own situation, and then what you call it came and shut them down. Who was it? Cyrus, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar went and shut all that down, scattered them out, brought them into Babylon. They're in Babylon. They start. What do they start doing? They don't start the synagogue. They don't. They start to build a makeshift temple, but they're now more into the Babylonian magic side. They into, you know what I'm saying, getting into all of that, and then eventually create what they call the Talmud, right? Which is kind of horrible, and they use that to then justify once they get to be able to get freed by Cyrus the Great, go back. They under the Persian protection. They able to get their temples rebuilt. But who's rebuilding the temples for them? Because the Persians wasn't the best architects. So who did they get? They got the Egyptians. See? Bringing the Egyptians back into it. Bringing Ham back, Mizraim back into it. Bring them into it. They build up the temple for them. They rock ever so long. Eventually they descend into basically national madness, right? That's the national sins. Killed they own, that came back to tell them that they was tripping because he came back to them. It says I came back to the children of Israel, right? And then the world came in on the blessing once the temple fell again. Once it fell again, that was it. Because now the fulfillment had come according to their story. Now, this outlook that I'm talking to you about has been around for hundreds of years. This was what they was debating during the Council of Nicaea, right? This is why Arius and them was like, nah, he always had to be divine in order to rise above all of the stuff that happened, because he represent the consciousness of the age. The Old Testament and all of that, with Adam and all of that, that represented a time frame, a time sphere that started, we could say, at the fall of let's say the flood. But remember, the flood came to flood everything that was already there. There were already things there. So we take it further back now to the time of Adam, right? Boom. Before I get to that, I'll finish this. It says the Jews were restored to the land after 70 years in Babylon captivity, right? So by 7-0, so that's God's cipher. So by that time, they supposed to know, okay, God done it again, brought us back to where we supposed to go. Let's go. They go back, and then what happened? They lost it again, right? They lost it again after rejecting Yeshua as the Mashiach, right? Again, I'm not talking to you from the religious aspect of a believer or whatever. I'm talking to you as an objective thinker now, right? Whether he was an actual personages or representative of the age or whatever, it really doesn't matter at this point. What matters is the time frame we talking about. So from 68, right, we get to about what they call 70 AD. Boom. This is now the end. So now Rome is ending, right? Persia's about to end. All of this stuff is collapsing around everybody, and everybody's freaking out. Nobody knows how they're going to be able to maintain, because again, Rome was and is the universal system that everybody in a sense had integrated themselves into. The only superpower to rival it again was Persia, right? Or Persis, or Paris. Paris and Persis and Persia and Pers is all the same place, right? They wound up losing it all. And so from losing it, right, they went into what they called the Dark Ages, right? Didn't they say that? They said they went into the Dark Ages after the fall of Rome, right? So this is after the Antichrist, who some believe was actually Nero. This is after the fire that destroyed Rome. This is after the destruction of Mount Vesuvius, which created the dust cloud that traveled throughout the world. Which the people say that was the cloud that these things that they saw manifesting out of everything was coming. So they referred to as the cloud of glory. And on this glorious cloud came these armies that went and shut everybody's shit down around the world, allegedly, right? Which led to destruction. Now, y'all heard of this dude named Philip K. Dick, the writer? He wrote Scanner Darkly, Minority Report. I was into a lot of science fiction and reading books, really books on science fiction stuff. Blade Runner, all of the stuff that you like that came out in the 80s, this nigga probably wrote it. Lawnmower Man, all of this stuff, right? All of that. So you know what type of time this nigga's on. So he once did, while he was alive, he did a speech in in Paris. And in the speech, this is an excerpt, one of the things he said. Now, he's one of the first people that the CIA and them was thinking. Some people say that he was a product of Ultra, and a lot of stuff that was hit him with, because he was slightly epileptic, that they was able to tap into a lot of things through him. So he was like a remote viewer channeler. So they say he was basically really good at prying in on alternative dimensions that we now know is real according to them. Remember, we grew up in I grew up in the era of history where there was no such thing, multiverse, all that type of string theory, all of that's what they call fringe science. It's not considered real. Okay. Now, all of that is science. All the shit they said was not real in the era we grew up in is now the real science that they was real back then. But we couldn't get it directly unless we was watching The Simpsons or some shit. Right? So why did Philip K. Dick mention a stream of sound of bells, then relaying his apparent experience in the kingdom of heaven that just so happens to tie in with the living waters which surrounded the Dark Age architecture and the frequency sounds which reverberated through its walls, dripping down into its streets? Even the mountain peaks of the hidden wildernesses seemed even Tyson, right? Which means polarized. Nobody popularized the multiverse theory quite like Philip K. Dick. Yes, there's a prior Star Trek episode, blah, 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 blah. So he had a lucid dream where he said he was in the millennial realm and all he heard was the sound of the bells, right? And the mountain streams and the cities and all this type of stuff, right? And it was literally heaven, right? Let me find the other part. He said, I experienced it just briefly. I'm not there now. I'm not sure I ever was. Certainly, I may never be again. I grieve for that loss. Loss it is. Somehow I moved laterally, but then fell back and then it was gone. A vanished mountain, right? That's the Rupus Negra or Mount Moriah or Mount Zion or whatever you want to call it. Vanished mountain and a stream and the sound of bells all gone from me entirely now, right? This is why you don't hear bells no more. When the last time you heard church bells really anywhere outside of, you know what I mean, areas that still like maybe, old Protestant Episcopalian shit like that? Remember when you was young, you used to hear them all the time. And I mean in the hood, like in the ghetto. I used to hear them. You know? It's all dead now. So in this dark ages that ended with the collapse of so-called Rome came the rise of who? Who came up during that time? Who was running society up until that time? Basically, who inherited that? Especially in Europa, especially in Asia. Because we just read earlier on the last one, we read how Genghis was basically a Christian warlord who was rival to the Pope. He was the emperor. He was killing these people. He was murder. They say during the era of what they call the Dark Ages, didn't they say over like 1 million or whatever people died? Or almost like however many millions of people died due to the plague and all this other type of stuff. Didn't they say that? Didn't Genghis, during the time that this is happening, this is also at the same time Genghis is out here doing what he do it. Didn't they say that he killed so many people that it changed the weather pattern, that it made the world in certain places colder? Didn't we read that? Who was he killing? Who were these people that were going? You know what type of work that is? This was them going around establishing the new order in which everybody will have to be down with the new system. And the new system was anti-slavery, anti-pagan, anti-waste. Like I said, they go into all these. There were no bathrooms in these old places. They started installing the bathrooms in the late 1900s, early to mid 1900s. They start putting bathrooms in these places. What was these people doing in the world before? Was they even going to the bathroom? No. That's why we always see them with some sort of halo or some shit around their heads. Well, that's why we always see them as some sort of glorified station. Because these people were the ones who were actively running the kingdom on earth. And this kingdom was an empire. This empire extended across the entire world, and everybody fell into it. Not through conversion, through acceptance. Through that acceptance, then came themselves being able to now upgrade into these venerated vessels that we look at today as exalted, that we call today illuminated. All of these ancient West Asians that they were showing us, King Arthur, all these niggas was melanated. All these people was Moors. All of these Moors with this incredible fashion, with these gold chalices and all this shit. Like, I thought at a time when we supposed to be slaves, I thought we were slaves. I thought that's what it was. I thought we were slaves. No, we couldn't be slaves because we were not the serf class that was taken into bondage in Slovenia. due to them being born of their father. We were born of our Father, who art in heaven, right? Who created a kingdom in which now we reunified the so-called human race, where we redid the everything. We went from what they call the classical period, right? Where niggas was living in ziggurats and all that type of stuff, and then we instigated the next so-called phase of the architecture that they're gonna call Gothic or whatever. No, that's all so-called barbarian, Tartarian, whatever you want to call it. That's old Moorish architecture, because this was the society that was running the world, that inherited it all. That's why all of the Moors grew their beards out. They all look like spitting image of Yeshua, right? When you see them, they all had the robes on. Whenever you see pictures of Jesus in the nativity scene, what you see these Moors around him, right, with feathers and turbans on, bringing him what? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Who was doing that at the time? They wasn't Romans. So who was the three kings? Where'd they come from? How did you have kings who were separate from the Romans if the Romans was running everything? You see what I'm saying? Here's another question. They say, how old did they say Adam lived to be? How old did they say he was? Or he lived to be? Some people say 800. Anybody else? They say he lived to be, the books that I read said he lived to be at least 930 years old, or 980. Somewhere between 930 and 980, right? Now, y'all have read the Bible, right? Or parts of it, or whatever. As Christians, as researchers, whatever, right? You read it. Okay. Where in the Bible does it say that Adam was born? Yes, Vonnie said he wasn't. Jay said it doesn't. Right. Both right. How was he made? Right. It's made from the mud. What day did that happen? What's the date on the seventh day? Do we know? Jay said the seventh. He was made on the seventh day. Correct. He died at 900 and let's say 80 years old, right? Correct. We know that the seventh day represent like 7,000, let's say 7,000 years, but that still don't give us a day. So if he was made without the use of a female, how how can they calculate that he died at 930? When did you start counting his age? Did you start, you had to start counting when he was in Eden, right? So at what point do you say, oh, he was 980 when he died? He was 900. How can you say that when technically he wasn't even born? He was made, he was created, right? We're born. We're born, we're created, right? We have dates when we come in, but even us, from the time of conception, right? You're here. You're going to be here, regards to, any unforeseen complications. You're going to be here. So shouldn't you start counting then? So that means when you come out, shouldn't you be two? So if he did exist in that way, he had to be way older than what they saying when he did die. Because it all started with him, right? The so-called reset started with him. The people that was already here on Earth already had civilizations. He comes in on the seventh, right? Reigned for however long he did or didn't or whatever. But what we do know is their story says that it got to about 930, 980 years. Then he died. Then his son started taking over all the way up, right? Because there's people still here. We just don't know or can't really get into who those people are, but they give us hints in the Bible. Like there's a thing in the Bible where it says that, and Cain and them went to war with the sons of Anak, right? Some Bibles have it listed as Anuk, right? That's the Anuki or the Anaki, right? Who themselves were of the giant species, as they say, who allegedly were sons of the fallen angels and all of this other stuff. That's not in the Bible. On your screen at the top on the left is an image of Yeshua, right? The king, right? The so-called King of Kings sitting at the head. In all of the crests and charters for all of the different nations throughout all of the world, you're going to see that image. Up until 1900, all of them was melanated like that. In the middle is one of the offshoot families of the Collins family and the Cordoban family out of Italy called the Corsi. They're the founders of Corsica. The founder of the Templars, I'll show you in a minute, was a Moor, an Islamic Moor, no doubt, named Hugh de Payon, meaning Hugh of the Pagans, Hugh Lord of the Pagans. He's the one that started to nationalize and give nobility to the Woodwose people and try to breed them out with the hair thing by promising them redemption if they made up the bulwark of his soldiers during the Crusades uh, with and against Genghis, who technically was the emperor of Europa, Asia, and parts of Africa. Okay. Then next to that image of the course is a old one of the original or older basilica images of King David. So why would people who were enslaved or slaves always be put in these regaled forms of opulence? Why is it that they're always the ones holding chalices of gold and jewels and crowns and all of that, walking amongst a bunch of white people that don't have none of that in these same pictures with them. Because the Moorish Empire, as it came to be known, were the inheritors of what happened in terms of the destruction of Rome and the purging of the world from Roman intrusion of the two powers, the three great beasts, which was Babylon, Rome, and Persia. All of the high priests and these people from these ancient religions, like I said, even Salman Farsi, who was the companion to Muhammad, he himself was a Zoroastrian at the time, right? And then he converted to Christianity, to Christ worship, right? Christianity, the Roman version, and then from there he uh, became, what would become a Muslim. You understand? So conversion and what was happening with the so-called 12 tribes, meaning those people who were down with that initial covenant to displace the original Canaanite peoples, right? Who were a combination of all of these nations that still had the genetic gene from the prior uh, cataclysm, right? Because not every giant was born in a giant body. Some giants was born small, like David, right? David was a kid. He was small, but he had the giant spirit. But because he didn't have it genetically in him, you see what I'm saying? He had the spirit. The spirit of the so-called Lord is what made him great. But when you really read the book on David, he was a horrible person. He was horrible. He's homosexual. He got he wanted his homeboy wife, his general's wife. So he made sure the general was in the front lines to get killed so he could get Bathsheba. Like, this nigga was violent. You know what I'm saying? He was slaughtering people. He was like the Alexander the Great of his time. But he kept his faith. He kept the covenant with that entity. You understand? That intent. And what was fulfilled in him later got fulfilled in his son Solomon, who they say also was one of the rulers of what we would consider Tartaria today. And from that time, Solomon, who was down with the Ephesians, aka Phoenicians, aka the Moors of that time, who could also trace themselves to the outcasted Danites, right? Who themselves also merged with those displaced Canaanites. See, they kept this disdain, in a sense, for Israel, even though they were a part of the kingdom. What made them Jews was when the kingdom, the northern and the southern kingdom, became united under Judah, you see. But the kings of Judah were chosen by people who weren't a part of any of the tribes. People like us, who were called the Pahath Moab, Phath dash Moab. In Old Turkic, Pahath became Pasha, see, which is now the Turkish Moorish word for ruler or sultan. So we was choosing their leaders up until a point, and then they bugged out and then went out and tried to take over everybody. Ramses eventually shut them down. And then, like I said, they go through whatever they go through. And then by the time the next tribulation happens, by 70 AD, now everything collapses. The glory cloud comes. Niggas is talking about they seeing niggas coming out of the sky with chariots and fire and raining down and burning cities. This is at the same time when Mount Vesuvius is blowing up, Pompeii is destroyed, the what you call it, the cloud is destroyed. You know what I mean? Now we going into the dark ages, and then this is when all of the wonder starts happening. We start just blooming. Moors just start creating all types of shit, repopulating crops, right? Translating all of the stuff the Romans and the Persians had, translating all of that from the Greek into Arabic, and then from the Arabic into Latin. But the people who are doing this, only 5% of them are Moors. But these Moors are representing the ruling class that's instructing and leading all of these post millennial Christians into this so-called golden era that I think lasted from 70 AD all the way up until 1492 or 492. And then they all retreated. The basilicas and everything was taken over. They let these niggas out of the pits. They started bringing these niggas and multiplying them, shutting down all of the bells. Excellent. Shutting down all of the bells, like what you see here. This was the throne that was in St. Peter's Basilica that they say that when the homie came, was on Earth, he allegedly was sitting in. They removed this now. This ain't in there no more. They don't put this somewhere else. So you can't see that no more. But you see the Moors under him, right? You see the 4 Moors under him. Peter, Paul, Mark, John, or Luke, or whoever. But they also represent the 4 corners of the world. They also represent the 4 elements. Right? The bells, like I said, there were always bells they say were going on. So whenever you see the fantasy movies like Narnia and all of them type of shit, there's always the bells and the spires because they represent the higher dimensional frequencies that were let loose to not only heal everybody, but keep the energy within the dome reverberating as much positive energy as possible, which then increased the etheric energy, which then increased the oxygen. See what I'm saying? Which also made everybody taller, made the fruits and the trees and the vegetables and all that stuff bigger. That's why when the white people started meeting up with the Moors after the fall, they said that they were like giants to them because they were. Remember, we locked these niggas up in the ice box for like 600 years. Actually, 1,000+ years, because we don't really know how long the Dark Ages lasted. Because you got the Dark Ages, then you got what they call the medieval period. So I would think the medieval period would be the period where it was starting to become more settled, and now you start to see the rise of a Christian extension of this in the form of the Holy Roman Empire around the 9th century, which was founded by 2 melanated people who were Germans named Otto and Edith. Then the Holy Roman Empire, like I said, extended to all the Hansas or the noble houses that worked with the greater empire to bring everybody together. You know what I mean? And thus it maintained that circumstance until everything started to decay towards the end. But what we do have is a bunch of coins and stonework that all have these things in it. Give me a second. It could be. This is why they only give us the science like within a certain sphere. So you could be a Moor, right? But you're only allowed to see it from the perspective of, you could be a Moor from America, but you can only see it from the perspective of the Moors from North Africa. You know what I'm saying? Even though we know North Africa is basically North America, we're just not going to associate it with that because we want to keep everything isolated to a geographic territory for maps that we created in the last 80 years. You know what I'm saying? One second. Okay. Yeah, it did look like Dick Gregory and the Kango. Um, you could read in the Circle 7 Quran, the covenant for the Asiatic nation. And then you could read the original covenant. The covenant I'm talking about is the covenant of Moses. I remember these people, according to their story, came out and they were a mixed multitude of different nationalities that all were together based upon their economic status in Egypt. And so, because they wanted greater wages and better life for themselves, and they wanted to worship the so called God that was given to them from Abraham, who was from the empire of Midian, right? Which was another empire they don't really talk about. They talk about the Midianites. They're also connected to a people in the western portion who were called the New Midianites, right? So, because they were the people who went from the east portion of so-called continent of Africa to the western portion, and eventually, as Numidians, became the cavalry for the Carthaginians, who themselves were a mixture of, again, ancient Phoenicians, blah 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 blah. So, yeah, they all clicked up and worked together, and eventually established themselves. Because what made them different was that they married into the other nations, as opposed to how the Israelites was doing. Once the Israelites did it and the empire fell and the second temple was gone, that was the end. Because now, according to their story, all of the sins for everybody were forgiven, right? According to their story. So if all everybody's sins were forgiven, that means only thing left was now the retribution that was to come on everybody who sinned against everybody who believed, right? And then the redemption, i.e., resurrection of everybody else, according to the story. Which means when in the book where he's talking about, I'm coming as a thief in the night, the time is at hand. No one knows the date. If no one knows the date, then you can't say when the world's gonna end. Like when you look back on the history, the Mayans never said the world was gonna end in 2012. What ended was that last cycle of time in which we were bound to the time spatial matrix that had been established when the erasure of the void centuries came into being, meaning in that time frame that all of this wondrous stuff happened that our ancestors was living through, right? Because we had lived through it in every incarnation. We know this because of the DNA testing of the original people, specifically from America, aka Henrietta Lacks and Albert Perry. Fauci the other day said that black people don't need vaccines because their genetics are superior to everybody else's. Didn't he say that? And who came out and dissed them? Who came out and had a problem with that? Black women. See what I'm saying? And when I say black women, I'm not talking about black women in general. I'm talking about those types of black women that are used as the tools, right? As the bedwench for the societal control. Whenever they talk about black rights, black humanitarian things, they only talk about black women. They're not talking, and we as so-called melanated men and children, like we know that. Like she's the only one corporatized that believes that, but she only really talking about. They only really talking about her because she's the linchpin and controlling everybody else. So it's the same thing with that. She would be in the Masonic tradition be referred to as the bride. She's used. She's the matter. She's the material world of Malkuth that's being used to bring about the new Aeon, right? According to their religion. So in the exclusion of that time frame and then the reorganization, right, of time, meaning the creation of these new people that's just coming out of here, these children that nobody knows who their parents and all that stuff is. You got huge people who, after this time is gone, they going through amnesia, they going through hallucinations, right? Then you got a whole branch now, people who want to who remember it and now have created little churches for themselves to get together to talk about it by reading about the Bible and all that and going through the Old Testament aspect. So the Old Testament is like wrathful vengeance, killing, murder, genocide, right? And the the almost denial or the forgetting of the original source, right? That created it. Then the New Testament is supposed to be now the redemption, the people's remembrance then of the spiritual aspect that exists within themselves that allows them now to exist in a new form, meaning that now they resurrected themselves from mental death and power, essentially, by baptizing themselves in, like how the Christians would say, they baptize themselves in the so-called blood, which again, that's the pagan aspect coming into it. But what they're really saying is, I'm now understanding that I'm born to those people who survived right after that, after this great time. And now I'm living in like in the post-apocalyptic era where all we have is the remnants of that. But we can't put it together properly because the people who are always there at the end are coming and giving us, taking our children and trying to give them the story of what happened as opposed to us doing it. So they create wars and shit that then take the men away, right? And then force the women now to raise the children alone, which then creates a system where now they wind up marrying foreign men, which then gives them more access to the land. You see what I'm saying? And now in a generation, everything is switched up, right? So these coins, it's like, what is the J? Like, what is a J year? But they didn't have ones back then. Like, what are they bugging? They're bugging. So it's really not 1760. This is 760. So this is the time of the Moorish Empire, which may explain why this nymph has a turban on, right? This is Polotura. So this might be in Polonia, Poland, or something to do with them, right? See the Moors wrapped up in the turbans with the scepter and the halo, right? Holding the world. And then it's something 700. This is J760. This is J768. So when was J year? Like, I thought the J didn't exist until the 1600s. See how this all kind of bugged out, right? But here we have in the 700s, there's a J, right? Unless it wasn't pronounced J back then, unless it's a aleph or a daleth or something like that. But it's definitely not a one. See what I'm saying? So again, how you know Adam died at 980 when you don't when he wasn't born at a time where they had dates? He was born within a time frame. However, that time frame is almost unknowable to people like us today. However, in the general context of him being a certain type of man created, that would be in the last 6,000 years, according to their calendar, which would make sense in their calendar. You see what I mean? Remember, the Moors, or the people who came to be known as the Moors, are comprised of all of these so-called ancient peoples that the Bible ordered killed. The Amorites, the Hittites, these types of people, they was all ordered murdered by the so-called Israelites for them to establish the kingdom, which explains a lot of the beef that people have with Moors today. However, we Moors, we're the ones on file fighting Rome up until the end, where everybody else eventually capitulated. See what I'm saying? Hold on, let me get this. So we are the inhabitants of all inhabitants because we're the the people who were the first displaced inhabitants. Yet all we did was go to places where we had all anciently been and reestablished ourselves and passed on the same stories and passed on the same knowledge, created new trade, and then passed it down to the sector of the society that was connected to the so-called ancient ways. So if it was the Tasalagi, who they call the Cherokees today, it would be the fire keepers. If it was in the Apaches, it would be those people in the Wolf Clan. If it was the um, the Montaka, who they call the Montauk, it would be the deer or the rain. You know what I mean? The reindeer clan. They would be held with that. They were the ones who were passing out the symbols and giving them the symbolic nature of what the symbols are. Because the same way the devil had the people who held down what happened from the last preset to the next, we had them as well. That's why we knew where everything was at after the deluge and the floods, what they call the Younger Dryas, the Younger Dryas era, and all of that. So these coins were all minted during the time of the Moorish Empire. And then those Moors who, at a certain point, from civilizing the Woodwolves, started giving them little titles of nobility and all of that for them to have for themselves. That's when a lot of stuff started going awry because now they was using their females as money and payment for knowledge and access to learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to shave, learn how to bathe. You understand? Because they would this is that was modern practice for the females. The females had always been re-civilized like that. The males was just used as grunts and killers and you know what I mean, wild wild men against each other and other Moorish nobilities that weren't that were now falling from their noble nature, falling from their noble, or what you call they glorified bodies, which is what the praetorists call it, which would be, your higher self, the ultra chivalrous Moors that you see in these old stories and stuff. So you see, it says the industrious acts of the Muslims of Northwest and Southwest Africa. These are the Moabites, the Hamathites, the Canaanites, who were driven out of the land of Canaan by Joshua, right? And received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle in the portion of Egypt. In the latter days, they formed themselves the kingdoms called to this day Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. The first mounds in the southeast were mainly to bury the dead and were probably constructed between the year 8000 and 1000 BC. By around 800 AD, see, a distinct way of life was developing in the lower delta. The mound sites allowed slowly expanded in sub-commerce and politics, and the early rounded burial mounds, mostly mines for copper, and were massive farms as well as homes. Blah blah blah. Trade burgeon, right? The early Mississippi period, because this they talking about here. These are the people who did it. And then through the centuries, right, they developed subcultures, and those subcultures came to be known as uh, Almakua, which is Olmec, or you know what I mean, um, Yamasi, or Mayan, Mayate. All of those are the Moors. That's why when in Henry versus Turner, and they showed and proved the connection to the mound builders. Once you connect to the mound builders, you connect it to these people who received the original permission from those pharaohs, because again, Egypt was over here. All of this stuff happened over here. That stuff over there was the theater created after the fall of everything. They've shown you images where they take the stones and move them brick by brick and literally remake the place. Y'all seen that, right? They did it with the temple of Ramses and Abu Simbel when they moved it after they flooded Aswan to hide all of the Moorish cities and all of that there. They did the same thing when Abdul Aziz in the 80s and 70s and 80s demolished the Moroccan quarter in the so-called Jerusalem over there, because that was the oldest quarter over there. All of the quarters in Jerusalem is the oldest. They demolished the whole shit, right? The Sunni Wahhabis, right? Because they're really Persian Romans. You understand what I'm saying? Who are creating and maintaining the Saturnian Freemasonic rituals that everybody is labeling as Islamic observance, or you know what I mean, Sunni or Wahhabi Sunni Islamic observance. But that's not Al Mecca. That's not the original place we was doing pilgrimage and stuff out here before that place was even built. It's just you're seeing the creation and the amalgamation of the two different peoples, right? Those of us that descended from everybody that was here beforehand, and then those of us who are descended as well from those people who came after, right? Who then mixed in, and then through their admixtures started mixing in with everybody else. All of the so-called all of the so-called races that started to come after. It's not racism to know who you are or where you come from, but it's colonialism when you try to tell me that I only come from a certain point in the earth, when everybody on the earth at the time you're referencing, these people were us. And I'm not talking about Lucy. And I'm not talking about, you know what I'm saying? These other imaginary people you making up. I'm talking about the original people that was already here, both before and after the so-called antediluvian and antebellum worlds. So after the fall, like I said, of the Moorish Empire, what do you get? You get the induction of what they call the Dum Diversis and the so-called Burgos, Law of Burgos, which basically was the new so-called black nobility taking over, using the Woodwos, right, as their beasts of war, and then forcing everybody to adopt their understanding of Christianity. The Eanity in Christianity, Eanity means that which lacks substance. Christ is the divine nature of man. At the fall of the so-called Moorish Empire, the surrender of Granada, whatever you want to call it, remember, we're the peoples collectively that helped initiate the fall of one of the two or three of the greatest destructive forces in the world, which again was Persia, Babylon, and Rome. At the fall of those, their collective wisdom that was already there had then been hyper realized by those, the meek, that inherited the earth, right? After this so called destruction of the temple and the opening up of all this shit, and then everything starts getting crazy. All of the spires, all of the old uh, so-called classical pyramid ziggurat type buildings, they start getting kind of left behind and derelict. And then what you start getting is more of the, what you say, Roman type. And then from that Roman type, it then goes into what you would call the cathedral Gothic type. During that era, right, you get this explosion of architecture and technology throughout the world, where there's over 250,000 bells just in Europe alone. You know what I'm saying? And all of these cities seem to be operating again from time immemorial by these people who themselves are coming in all of these different forms, but are functioning under the whatever national character they are in their area. You know what I'm saying? And then shit happens. These things start coming out, and then they start having to use them again to start to bring everything to heel. Because again, they start popping up out of nowhere, taking over castles, burning people out, eating people, right? Using them for rituals, right? Eating out there, reading the future in their entrails. This is what they're doing to Moorish peoples now throughout the world, as it's now the demonic time that's ruling. And so, to ensure that this time happens within a void period, they create the intergravissimus, which then cuts off time between February, right? February, let's say 8th, is like the last day of this era, and then starting a new date the next Friday on the next October, right? As 14th. So they done skipped all of these months, all of this time, put everybody on a 12-month, right? 364-day situation, create the temporal power over everybody, use the Saturnian magic, use these things to push everybody to the brink. And then these things even start rebelling against each other. They start fighting and killing each other because now the ones that shave think they better than the ones that's not shaved. The ones that's taking baths think they not better than the ones that's not taking baths. See what I'm saying? And so this is a lot of killing. So this killing goes on, for whatever, as long as it takes. This is all in the Bible. This is all in Revelation. This is Genghis going out there murdering, hacking, killing everybody, right? But they never told us that he was a Christian, but he was closer to an historian type Christian, a warrior type Christian. Their Christ fight, their Christ conquers, their Christ is the one, you see what I'm saying, that they was in the kingdom with. And now it's kind of over. By the time of Aga Khan, he gets in, it's basically kind of over. You know what I mean? But again, this part of the world is always seen as the prize. It's seen as mythic because it was untouched by most of this conflict. You see what I'm saying? Because you had to have certain permission and all that to get here because this was the last bastion. That's why they didn't say we went and found the new country. They said we found the new world. We found an entire new world over here. These niggas is living incredibly. We fighting for scraps. So like I said, by the time Quintus marries into the Inca line, right? He married the daughter. They have a baby. That baby have a baby. That baby have a baby. Then they wind up moving to Haiti eventually, right? They have children again. His line keep having children. That's why he royal. That's why he winds up becoming president and all that because he's from this royal line because they would spread their children out, just like Genghis did. He would take over a place and then say, okay, I could kill all of y'all, or you can marry my daughter. Once they married his daughter, then boom, he now ruled their kingdom. You see what I'm saying? Without having to rule it. So it was the same thing with that. Like, what about the stories the Christian tells about Jesus' twin brother James? How come nobody ever talk about that? That's what I thought the Book of Clarence was about. Did James have children? Right? So this is what I'm saying. Like the whole thing is we was already here. These capitals already existed to such an ancient extent that they had to literally raise the ground to meet them. This is Washington. You understand what I'm saying? At a time when when the government's supposed to be being run. Who's taking these pictures? How come in all of these pictures the sky is always like this? They call that a vanilla sky. You saw, if you saw the movie Vanilla Sky, it was about the dude who basically died in a car accident, woke up in an alternate timeline, but they couldn't bring him into it. They had to allow him to exist in the void area until he realized it for himself and then brought himself into the reality. That's what we're dealing with right now. You understand? Like, Houdini died in the 70s, bro. You know what I mean? Like, when you think of Houdini, like, this nigga died relatively not that long ago. But you think about the time that he was born into, you're like, well, damn. Yeah, because time is not how we see it. When we're young, we don't think about the time to come as much as we should. Or then again, we don't have to because we're young. But as we get older, the times that we were younger become more and more apparent. And the shit we did when we was older becomes less apparent. That's why older people, like grandparents and stuff, is supposed to be around young people. Because young people make old people feel younger, help them, become younger. And it's the vice versa for them. That's why when we look at all of these old pictures of these places that you see on these Tatarian websites and stuff, they all have certain images of the cherubim, and you see what they call the Arc de Triomphe. It's like the arc that you'll see. It's like an archway that you'll see in France. You'll see it in Brooklyn. You'll see it in Rome. You'll see it everywhere. Those archways and the soldiers and the forces above them, when it says, okay, this is dedicated to the defenders of the Union, you think the Union is the United States Union of the North. But it was literally that, a United States Union of Northern powers. So all the powers of the North, whether it be Russia or United States, France, Germany, right? All of them are going against the original peoples that lived in these areas. You understand? Because these older people are using the dumb diverses. They're using the law of Burgos that they have now adopted as the new face of the millennial reign. And so Burgos. And and then they become now the progenitors, and now they start to create the art in their own image. They start to rework the history on how it's supposed to go. And now we become, who were the gods in the last epoch, we are now the devils in the new one. And so they tell us that these people were slaves in these pictures, and these people are being lynched and all of that. And they tell us that there was such a thing as the Bible Belt. But if you put a map of the Bible Belt, a map of the original southern states, a map of the so-called black diaspora in the South, they all overlap and make the same map, because you're talking about the same people who were part of the southern jurisdictions now, going all the way from there all the way down to Peru and South America and Brazil and all of that. That's why Haiti was able to fight and free all of those people from the jurisdiction during those wars, which is why Haiti, from that point, the new Christianity that was now telling people that the white man was God, and that the kingdom of God had not come, that there wasn't no golden era, that all y'all was slaves. The shit your grandmother and them remember is not real. They locked all of them up in insane asylums. They hung them, right? Because like I said, they was catching the so-called Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues. That's them tapping into the alternate reality or having flashbacks of it in what they call a quickening, right? So that's a real-time example of people going in and out of a reality, right? But we look at it as, oh, this person's going crazy, this person that. That may be for some people, but that's an example of how these places were now being repurposed to channel this type of energy so that way they can make money, right? Because if everybody knew all of that shit happened already, right? Then what are you going to church for? Because what it basically did, if you go by their logic of what Christianity really is, what they're really saying then is this being came and died for your sins. So when you're born sinless now. You tack on these sins that we call demons or that you call whatever, because we accept this version of this reality, right? That is not even real. We don't find out it's not real till we go see movies like The Matrix and shit, and then it's like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Yeah, but it's been happening before we even realized it was that. It was that. Our parents and them was participants in that. By the time Malcolm X realized that everybody was on the take, it was over for him. But same thing happened to his father. You see what I'm saying? Who was then killed by the KKK, who themselves were following a program. You see what I'm saying? Orchestrated by the same niggas that created the Birth of a Nation film that they put in all of the Freemasonic ISIS movie theaters, that they brought all of these new minted children, slaves, right? And mass mind control to make them think now that when they come to these new areas that they're now being brought into, and they say, okay, this is now your house, and they go in there and see these white people and shit, okay, you just got to take a picture with this Indian mask on or this fez on or whatever, right? And then your father now becomes part of the lodge, in which basically governs that community to make sure certain people do certain things, this and that, right? That's why every TV show we seen in the 50s, the father was always a Mason, going out on Thursdays, keeping shit from the family, right? The kids have to figure it out for themselves. This is what they was doing, because this is why none of these people remember it. But our great grandmothers and them do. That's why they was always humming. That's why they was always talking about, when Jesus come and all that, or when Jesus came, because it probably did. Just not the way that we think. But according to their Bible, according to their story, it already happened, and it makes sense. So now we're in the time of the zombie period, in the after ruins, and they're making it look, they dressing it up to look like, oh, this is some new modern shit, and it's not. That's why they can't create nothing new. That's why everything goes back to the time of what I'm showing you here. Because this is them. But now what's happening is the time is up. Once the Chevron deference came in, it created a circumstance where they could no longer use bureaucratic agencies to dictate governmental or state policy. So naturally, all of the funding has to go, because they're stripping everything away that's not directly connected to the constitutional republic. And we interface to the constitutional republic through our representative, which is our so called local government, meaning our direct community, our businesses, our trusts, estates, right, and our collective electoral power. So anything that's not reflective of that has to go. And thus, because everybody has been so used to everything happen, Saturn has now shut down the entire thing for everybody. So it's over. You know what I'm saying? That's it. There's nothing they can do about it. So, anybody have any questions? Y'all seen beehives and stuff before, right? You know how they always look hexagonal, right? Like when you look at a honeycomb, whatever, they look like that because the frames that they use to keep the bees in are a literal frame. This is what they look like. This is the type of honeycombs that they make when they're not confined by a frame. This is them themselves making them. Not only can you draw the honey from this, but you can eat them. You can eat this to like where there's nothing left.
This, I believe, is two different. This one
When did the Moors, CJG says, when did the Moors start using the term Allah specifically to describe God as their highest self? Um, Around the time of the split between the so-called Pale Arab and the greater, let's say, Moorish Empire, Allah to the Arab was just one of the deified gods in the Kabbalah. Excuse me, in the Kaaba, and it was like a demon. So the Allah originally in the so-called Proto-Hebrew, when it was the Canaanites referring to it, it was referred to as Il, right? Or Elion, but mostly Il, right? The Aramaic peoples adopted Il, or I would say the Hebrews adopted El, right? And then transliterated El to be Yahweh, right? Where they basically tried to merge Yahweh and El into the same being because they were also exalting Yahweh. The more prestige they got as a kingdom, the more they wanted their God to be more exalted than everyone else's. So, of course, they started to raise the stature of him from initially being a God to represent them specifically to then being a creator God of everybody in the world. Thus, everyone had to fall under the sway of this God, which then would justify their right of killing them. Because essentially, if you really look at it, these Israelite people they talk about were a group of marauders, nomadic marauders who left what they knew to live in the wilderness for a while, which may have drove them a little crazy. And then they became spies. When you read about Abraham or Moses sending people into Canaan, he sent them in as spies to see what he could find to figure out how to bring them down. Like, this is how their nation started. And was calling these people pagans when they were receiving their messages on rocks. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the blind getting mad at the deaf. According to their story now. This is not what I'm saying we even happened or was a part of. I'm just saying to look to the logic of what they're saying. But all of what I'm talking about hinges on Adam. Think about it. It really all hinges on Adam. And if Adam died at 980 years old, somebody has to explain if you know that's when he died, then when was he born? And when did you start counting his age? Because technically he was not born. He was created. And then Eve was created out of him by taking a ribosome, not a rib, not a bone, a ribosome, a chromosome. You can look up what the ribosome does and see how it relates. So you're talking about genetic alteration, which explains why his children are so into surgeries today. Think about it. We wasn't a people to really get into surgeries and butt implants and penis implants and hair implants and breasts and eyes, and we wasn't doing none of that. We wasn't doing none of that until 2000, right? Because it all ended. Something happened between 88 and 2000. The same way something happened between 70 AD and 1492. 492. After 492, by 1581, they had added 1,000 years to their time period, subtracted 1,000+ years from ours, and then buried the other. We already showed and proved it. Here on the right hand side, left hand side, you see the Christ figure outside of reality, right? Manipulating the sun and the moon on the circular disc, garbed in the purple, right, which represents the Milky Way, right, with the halo in another time period. But if you look at the color, it's the same color as the honeycomb. See what I'm saying? What do the Jews be saying to you when you're out breaking down Sephardic antique and what type of combos? They don't really the ones that do, they speak from the perspective of humbleness for the most part. They don't really do that, because once they see the fez and the turban, they already know. And then when they see that, okay, he's a Muslim, he's not like one of these, religious types. Like I'm consider myself religious or spiritual, but not from the perspective of how these people are doing it. I'm from the perspective of how Moors do it. By putting love first, you automatically negate any of the extra attitude that they'll try to add on top of it to throw you off your game. I already know who the Moors are and what the Moors did and how we created them. So there's nothing they could do other than submit. Because I also don't want nothing from them. If I wanted something from them, then it might be different. But no, they don't, you know, because we Moors have access to both sides of the Kabbalah, both the front and the back. That's why the dirtiest Moors can be the most successful, while the cleanest Moors or the most pious Moors may be the most overlooked. See, Africa, it was used in old classical sense for the limited tract about Carthage. See, Africa only applied to Carthage. So whatever Carthage was Africa. So Carthage, South Carolina, Carthage in Texas, Carthage in Montana, Carthage, all of that's Carthage. We find Faz and Meknès, right? Mekines, converted into one settlement, the Maghrebi, Mauritanian, or Moroccan. See, Moroccan with an A. Moroccan is famed for sorcery throughout the Muslim world. See, the Muslim kingdom of Africa was composed of four provinces. See the four people that was under the statue of St. Peter that I showed you? It's the Moors. Tunis, Tripoli, Constantine, and Bugia. The considerable part was held by the Berber tribe of the Sanhaja and the Sanaga, also the Zanaga, also the Seneca. See? Moors. Whence our modern Senegal, other noted tribe held the Bayish, the Bugia. In Africa proper was the Zuaha, the European Zouaves, right? Who was the Zouaves? The American Moors who fought in the so-called Confederacy. The American Moors. So, to show and prove the work that we have all put in over the years, to show and prove that like when you sign up for your Moorish thing, it's either you got to check more American Indian, white, Hispanic, because all that applies to you. All three of those make up the one designation in terms of more, right? If you're going to use it as a racial classification. Now, the good part of the racial classification designation is that it allows the fact that there is an alternative historical documentation or racial connotation to the usage of such and the application of such on governmental documentation, because then it also goes with who and what those people are and the treaties and stuff that represent them. So now they can't deny that, which means they have to put it now on governmental forms, right? To make sure that you have the ability to choose whether or not you are Negro or African American, which means property, Negro, African American, colored, American Indian, which means more without the nationality, white, which means North African, which is a descriptive of you being of the original peoples of of Europa, which you are based on your ancestry, but there's no national identity connected to that. Whereas now Moorish or Asiatic denotes a nationality. You understand? So now, see, what does it say? Or will, boom, black, African, African American, or Alaska Native, Asian, or Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Latino, Middle Eastern, North African. See, it comes right after North African, i.e., or, right? Look up what VIII stands for, Asiatic or Moorish. And it goes into effect July 1st, which is what? Independence Day, right? Right, right. So you don't have an excuse no more. So when you say that you're Moorish or Asiatic, and then you provide the documentation to show and prove that, that means they have to acknowledge that because that's in their federal database as an active so-called racial classification, which is the most accurate out of all of them. Now, on the corporate aspect of that, of course, you have to define you as a living soul, but that's what your individual private trust and all of that is for. And your connection to the temple or whatever, that's what that's for. So what they're gonna say now? What they're gonna say now? They're not gonna be able to say nothing now because this is actually now linking all of those identities up into one. So this save you the work. So look at it like this: he don't already set up the tariffs. He don't already took over the canal. He done took over the Fertile Crescent, called it the Gulf of America. Yeah, they have to follow federal suit because that's where the prophet initially set the temple up. That's why it had to happen there first. So now, you see what I'm saying? This also gives the proper temple more power to exert its proper influence to be able to, expand itself outside of the thing. Because this goes right along with the proclamations that we've been getting for the past 20 years. So the tariffs done been set up. Asiatic and Moorish has to be added to the racial classification list without deferral of the actual nationality by doing so. Because remember, HJR 75 already established the fact that you already had the right to do this from before the bankruptcy. See how all this worked? So when people say, oh, that's just that, no, remember HJR 75, and then before that, the Sundry Free Moors Act, and then before that, the Treaty of Peace of Friendship, the letter to George Washington, and then before that, the surrender of Grenada. They got to honor all of that. And now it's in the governmental database, which is why they had to get rid of the trans thing. Because all of the money now got to get diverted to the sovereign wealth fund that actually is the debt that they owe us. It's actually us, our money. It's all working out for us. So who do they have on the front line saying it's not? The black woman, the boule black man. That's it. Ain't nobody listening to them, no. They don't have no power no more. It's over. So not only has that happened, As we close, I just wanted to show y'all this. What I was telling y'all about the other reality, shutting all of this stuff down. This is also happening. Remember, I told you this reality is functioning on a limited basis because it's in a void, and everybody outside of it knows it. So we come here as a means of exercise, but it was hijacked by parasites. And then those parasites started infecting our bodies literally. And then through those parasites, it opened up portals and it gave us little things in our minds that would help us reactivate all this old shit that we were supposed to forget how to do it. That's why we don't remember really how to make the pyramids and none of this shit. Because we don't need to do that no more. Because we done transcended all of that. It's all in us now. We are the temple. We are the pyramid. We are that which is the temple on earth, the temple of man, the Solomon, both man and woman. It's us now. So essentially, Christianity died when the temple died. You see what I'm saying? Because it had already been fulfilled. And everybody had witnessed this dude come through and then seen how the world had changed into for the better within that period. And then after that period had ended, which again, they said the Moors ruled for how long? They said Moors ruled for, the original book said, over 1,000 years. After we started bombing them with Moors and they had to admit it was us, then they limited it to 900 years. But what is that? So really, it's double, triple. Because they also say that the Moors ruled through the Dark Ages. So how you say we ruled for 900 years, but then the age is 2,160 years? Which one is it? It's both. Because it happened in such a degree that we only get in the scraps of how glorious and shit it really was. And so they downplay it all by making us hate the fact that and turn our own people against us being Moors. As if to say me and being a Moor now no longer qualifies me of being a Washita or a Seneca or a Montaka or whatever, when all of those is Moorish names fall under the old Mauritanian races. Who were the ancient Hittites, Moabites, blah, blah, blah? Who were the ancient Canaanites? Who were the ancient Phoenicians? Who were the ancient these peoples that we can't even remember? But we're only using these words because these are the closest names that we have to identify the epoch in which we were taken from. That's why all of this is interesting to us. That's why those of us that was on this before it was popular, we're basically the gods of this thing now. You know what I'm saying? You know more about the reality of how all these religions and things came into existence and why they have to exist now. And the fact that they exist as a means of empty places. Because remember, Yeshua came and they Bible came and destroyed the temple. He kicked the people out, the money changers out of the temple. So how come there's ATMs in churches today? Because these are the dead churches. These are the zombie churches. These are the zombie corporations that exist in the post-apocalyptic zombie world that we're in. You understand? Always trying to keep the real world out. Well, physicists found a ghost haunting the world's most famous particle accelerator. So what they're saying is that a photonic entity is stopping them in an aspect of phase space that exists and creates resonances that blocks them from doing certain things, like a barrier, but it's spiritual because it's moving. So even the ether is stopping these niggas. Remember, I told you none of their stuff is gonna work no more. This is it, man. So, yeah. So, get Story of the Moors in Spain, Story of the Moors after Spain, the book Templars and Assassins, um, the book, uh, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, from from God to man, from Superman to man. Definitely get that. And what else? One World Tartarians. That's a great book. Um, yeah, One World Tartarians, and trying to think of anybody else. Those are good joints to get into. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, we always been here and we always been doing our thing, you know. So when they talk about the Normans and the the Saxons and all of these so-called ambiguous things, but they always showing you white people, it's not, it's us. Like this is the original, one of the original coats of arms of the so-called people they call the Normans, which is also reminiscent of the old Egyptian joint that have them on it as well. So this is before the United States or America was even thought of, which means it was already thought of. I found this image online when I typed in Moors with turbans. So anybody else have any questions? It's from the Kemp, like Johnny Kemp, but back then it was called Kampft. The crest that I'm showing you is from the Kampft, which became Kempt or Kampft, and then eventually became Kempton, and then, like I said, Kemp. Like Johnny Kemp just got paid. Yeah, so the Indians and all of these people, they again was brought over here to work the factories. The Siberians was left over, and they was working with the enemy to make certain shit happen, and they did. And they helped wipe away everything memory that we actually had, but we didn't put it all together. We putting it all together now. You know what I'm saying? They can't really rock it. You know. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, but it's all Saturnian worship. It's all them trying to maintain a position over the original people because it's our land. And now they finding out that it's not. The Siberians always knew that they participated in the charade, and now they getting kicked out. And they don't have any other way around it. And now that the Asiatic and Moorish, like I said, is becoming more and more of a thing, this means that this now becomes more of a lifestyle option, which means they don't have to add Moorish whenever they have race or whatever starting July 1st, 2026. You're going to get that on you. So not only can you check Asiatic or Moorish, you can check both because you're both. You understand? Which means we have changed it. We've changed things. We Moors have changed the reality. And now, not only are they making it so that way Asiatics and Moors can be recognized on all federal state documents, they done made it now where they're using Moorish law in terms of tariffs, in terms of tariffs, right? To pay for it so that way you don't have to pay taxes no more. Income tax, at least, which is, again, constitutional. That's what McKinley did. That's why they killed them. So they already tried with this nigga. It ain't gonna happen again. You messed up. So you gotta get what your hand called for. So that's three W's in a row for us. They done took you out the WHO. The white man Kennedy that said that your genetics is superior over everybody else on the planet. What? All of this happened in 2 weeks. So, as they say, quit your blood clot crying. You know what I mean? and get used to the new reality and shape it how you want, because it's gonna be a surplus of money for you to do what you need to do. Elon going to do this. Elon wasn't elected. Neither was Fauci. And that nigga had y'all niggas walking around with masks. He could have said, put this dog shit in the mask and walk with it. You'd have done it. You got to find a way to find a doctor, pay this nigga off of USA money to make it seem like dog shit in the mask will help you with the COVID. This how crazy niggas was. So don't tell me that. If y'all killed this man on a wheelchair, y'all be walking around with wheelchairs on your neck. When he said you can go to the farmer now. But y'all don't want that. Y'all believe the dogma that Peter, who killed these niggas who was killing Christians and was doing all types of shit. The Romans, these niggas done wrote the books, rewrote the books, put the pagans in, took the pagans out. And now we going by what they say. So the kingdom didn't come yet. The time is coming. So now if the white man want to make it look like it came, he could do it again. Y'all niggas will believe it. So long as he got a YouTube page, a TikTok page on it, a Twitter feed on it, as long as it's trending. Oh, coming! Jesus came. Jesus is back. It's trending. That's what y'all gonna do. So, meanwhile, those of us that know all about all what I'm showing you, we don't already moved into the alternate reality in which we are receiving the benefit from keeping the faith and understanding that the kingdom is within, and we are never outside of it. We're only in this place for a little while, and this season is over when we transcend it, meaning when we die, meaning when we go back to being one with everything, while the rest of these niggas keep coming back here acting like it's a new thing. It's not. So to end it all, um, big up to the more that sent me this. To end it all, um, this is how it's all broken up. Okay, so you could take a picture of that and then do the nods to it. You know what I mean? But this what we're talking about, they're gonna say, oh, it's he's trying to merge it with preterism. No, this is what the glory age of the Roman. That's why they called it the golden age of the Moor. Again, how long is that age? 2,164 years. So somebody add 670 AD and 1492. Is that over 1,000 years? Yes. Who was running shit right before the time period we in right now that white people running it? The Moors. And when did everything change? When they fell. And when did they fall? They fell at the hands of their own people and their own children. And then they created a pseudo Moorish empire called the Spanish Empire, in which they could perpetuate their new Christianity, which is fake because Jesus himself was not, Yeshua himself was not a Christian. Moses himself was not a Hebrew. Buddha himself was not a Buddha, was not a Buddhist. Krishna himself was not a whatever they call a Hindu. They were what their nationality was, Islam. So yeah, so we are definitely in a different time frame. We, like I said, I think we're in this void space that don't really exist. That's what the Mandela effect. That's what all of this crap they keep trying to do to us is. Keep trying to recycle this. Like they about to make a live He-Man movie. Come on, it's over. But they can't make anything new because we haven't made nothing new. Because a lot of us fell victim to this thing too, and we think it's real, and it's not. It's fake. It's another priesthood religion created by the resetters, the so-called apron wearers who keep the secret. Whenever there's a new time, they reflip it and then put it on and then start the whole shit over again. At least that's how it seems. So definitely, if you haven't, please check out ADOT. And if you haven't also check that out already, check out the DOSCO 418. I got the ebook up on Apple and Google Play. It's definitely a good read. It gets into everything we talk about now. Also, if you haven't, please check out um, www.aseer.com. That has a link to a lot of the stuff that I've been doing and have up. Also, definitely check out CordobaOrganics.com. Definitely honest to Selena, always holding me down and giving me the space to do this with you guys. You know what I mean? Definitely. Um, please check those out. Um, Next week we'll get more into the different factions specifically, as well as the integration now of Moorish laws, such as tariffs, such as racial classification, such as how Waqifs were supposed to work for us, which is what the so-called constitutional, excuse me, what the Bill of Rights and all of that. That's essentially what all of that stuff is, because it's supposed to represent free people, and the Moors were the freest people on the planet because wherever we went, we were part of the kingdom that set everybody free. you know. So you definitely want to check that out. Anybody have any other questions? I couldn't get into certain things. I didn't have enough time. Islam. So yeah, man, let everybody know the end is not yet. This is the time we're supposed to be refining and all of that, because like the prophet said, um, everything is going to come back in the hands of the Asiatic. And thus far, anything black per se, and anything that's not addressing the Asiatic in its proper person, his or her proper person, you're going to be able to now choose. So you choose Moorish, you choose Asiatic. Now the documentation that you have definitely has to not only be accepted, it has to be taken seriously, because this is a designation that then puts it under an Article 3 designation, which means that it has to be respected due to the fact that the Moors are part of, represented from the preamble to the seventh article, from the Articles of Association, from the several states. All of that relates to us as so-called free people. You know what I mean? Indians non-taxed. Who were the people paying for all of this? So we already in Morocco. We already in North Africa. We already in the Empire. We already in ancient Egypt. We already in ancient Rome. We already in all that shit. But now it's the sheeps is gonna be separated from the goats, and we should want that. You know, this is what we wanted. This is what we read about in the fall of America and all of that. It's just that we realize now we got stake in the game. When we first read Fall America, we didn't know we had stake in the game. We got skin in the game now. All of the shit is ours. So in the end, like they said, Frank White said, if there's if a nickel getting sold in the park, I want in. So this is without reparations, y'all. This is without having to get affirmative action. This is without having to get any handouts. So they're trying to create a whole new generation now that's self-sufficient outside of these TikTok drones. So inshallah, let's hope for the good, prepare for the best. You know what I mean? Get rid of the worst. So Islam, everybody. Thanks for the support, and we'll get up next weekend. Peace.